What's good everyone, this is Micro here, and today I want to give you an updated guide video on Marvel Rivals. This season we have 4 new characters coming to the roster. That would be Mr. Fantastic, Invisible Woman, the Human Torch, and also the Thing. Therefore, I want to give you my thoughts and opinions on how you can best fight against these characters when you're playing as Magneto, Squirrel Girl, or Cloak and Dagger, since those are my top 3 main heroes that I play. On top of that, I can also give you my thoughts and opinions on best synergy when you have any one of those characters as teammates, when you are playing Magneto, Squirrel Girl, or even Cloak and Dagger in Marvel Rivals. So without further ado, let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about today is combat, dueling tips when you are fighting against Mr. Fantastic or fighting against Invisible Woman in Marvel Rivals. I'll talk about how you can fight against the Human Torch and the Thing once they release later on in the season. I'll make a separate video on that, but for today, let's just focus on the 2 new characters that has been released. Now, starting with Mr. Fantastic, I played a little bit. I can definitely see his quality as being a duelist, but in my mind, I feel like he really is just a vanguard in a duelist body. He knows how to absorb a lot of damage, and also the fact that one of his moves set where he can inflate himself to become wide and just deflect a whole lot of projectiles and even melee attacks. On top of that, he can also absorb ultimates and then deflect any of that damage he absorbed back at the attacker for some decent damage against the heroes that he fire against. I could definitely see him as a really good brawler or a duelist hero. What that means is if you are playing as Magneto and you're fighting against Mr. Fantastic, one of my biggest suggestion is to avoid using a lot of your cooldowns against Mr. Fantastic. And the reason why I'm saying this is because he does have a lot of capabilities to absorb a lot of your attacks, whether you're using your chaotic sword from your team up ability or if you're just doing your bread and butter combo. He can easily pop that deflective skill and just absorb that damage and then deflect it back at you, or he can deflect it back at one of your squishier teammates. So I would advise to avoid dueling against him in a 1v1 situation. However, if you do have teammates around you fighting against Mr. Fantastic, then by all means go for it, because he can only absorb so much damage before he has to release the deflected bullet back. So it gives you the opportunity to burst him down after he gets out of that state. And even if he goes into that giant elastic state where he kind of becomes giant arms and a giant body, he will obtain a lot of overhealth in that period of time. But as I mentioned, you can burst him down if you work with your teammates to pick him off together. How I think about it is whenever Mr. Fantastic becomes large in that state, I would treat him as the same way you would treat a Hulk using his ult to become that giant world breaker Hulk form. It'd be wrong for you or your teammates to run away during that time. So you would have to coordinate your attacks to burst them down as quickly as possible so you can get them off the field. Now, if you're playing as Squirrel Girl, similar rules kind of apply. However, you do have a better opportunity to duel against Mr. Fantastic in a 1v1 situation if you need to. You just gotta time when you think he's going to use his deflective skill, so you don't use any of your CC cooldowns on him, because he can deflect the squirrel blockade, which then means that you can't CC lock him. But if he's outside of that cooldown, or if you wait until that cooldown wears off and he returns back to normal, you can still use your squirrel blockade and mammal bonds to CC lock Mr. Fantastic before he can run around and either burst you down or burst your support healers down. So it's during that time frame is when you should use your cooldowns to take out Mr. Fantastic before he causes any more damage. And if you're playing as Cloak and Dagger, since you are support as the main role, I would say the same rule applies. Dance around his deflective ability. If you know he hasn't cast it yet, don't try to switch to Cloak and use your debuff and blind him. Wait until you see him use his deflective ability, and after it wears off, then you can switch to Cloak and then cast your Dark Force Veil, because during that time, your teammates should coordinate their attacks against Mr. Fantastic, and by you giving him a 20% damage taken debuff, it should be much easier to take down a person like Mr. Fantastic, even though he has the highest health in the game right now as a DPS duelist that's a brawler. And the fact that he can get a lot of health anyways with his shield because of one of his passive abilities. Therefore, as Cloak and Dagger, I would just focus around baiting out his deflective cooldown, then going for the kill. Now if we're going to talk about Invisible Woman, she's a very unique support character that I consider as a saboteur. She can cast her ult to heal her allies a great amount consistently, almost on par as Mantis, Luna Snow, or even Cloak and Dagger. Plus on top of that, any allies and enemies who's within that radius becomes invisible. So it makes it hard for people outside of that dome to fight against anybody who are inside that dome. Plus on top of that, her ult can severely slow the enemies that's inside of it for a short duration. With all this being said, if you are either Magneto, Squirrel Girl, or Cloak and Dagger, and you see the enemy Invisible Woman cast her ult, it is oftentimes that it's best to just walk away. Don't try to engage or disengage if you're already in the middle of a team fight, because there'll be a lot of times that the damage you'll try to inflict during that duration, she's going to heal it right back up. So then all of your cooldowns, your resources, or if you try to pop an ult, it'll be all for nothing. So disengage from that fight. It only lasts for a somewhat of a short duration. Unless you're coming close to overtime or the time is running out, then by all means you would have to contest it no matter what. But if you have time on the clock, just disengage from that team fight. Wait for the ult to come down and then apply pressure again. The only people that could bypass this rule would be characters who has a one-shot type of ultimate, whether it be Iron Man with his maximum pulse or Scarlet Witch with her massive AoE nuke. Those type of ultimates could easily bypass this rule if you coordinate with your teammates effectively, because the one thing I did find out when I was playing as Squirrel Girl and I was dueling against Invisible Woman is that when she does pop her ult, even though she can heal a lot, if you manage to kill Invisible Woman before she can get to full health, you can actually cancel the ult altogether, and it'll even end early if she dies during the duration. So that's why I said it's risky to try to keep the team fight engaged unless you know that she's low on health. Then if you want to shoot your shot, then by all means try to pick her off before she starts getting healed up by her ultimate, and you can shut down the ult altogether. Or if you have an Iron Man or a Scarlet Witch who can do those AoE one-shot nukes, then they can have a shot of using their ultimate to try to take her out. But outside of Invisible Woman's ultimate, she's definitely a really good healer, but majority of her heal resides around her shield. Therefore, I would treat her shield as important as Penny Parker's Spider's Nest. Oftentimes, you would see an Invisible Woman cast her shield around her teammates, and then either she will dance around that shield to keep herself alive, or she'll keep casting that shield around her teammates who are consistently getting hit or being low on health. Therefore, the sooner you can take out her shield, she'll have a 6-second duration where she can't recast it again. So that will be your time to really be aggressive and try to pick her off before she can cast her shield again. Or you can pressure Invisible Woman, do damage to her, and force her to use her double jump ability, which would force her to turn invisible and disengage from the fight, because when she turns invisible, she can't do anything, or else she'll come out of that buff. Therefore, she can't heal her allies, she can't damage you, she will be invisible, so you just have to keep in mind of where she might pop up next. But during that short duration, that's one healer off the board temporarily, which then you can focus your sights on other characters. Now, out of my main 3 characters, I do find Squirrel Girl having a much better time putting pressure and consistent pressure towards Invisible Woman, just because you can do trick shots and bounce off the walls to take out Invisible Woman, you know, when she tries to flee or escape. When she does cast her ultimate, like I said, it's not worth taking the risk of trying to take out Invisible Woman. However, I was able to take out the enemy Invisible Woman when she popped her ult out of sheer luck. When I did a trick shot, bounced off the wall, and it hit her, killed her, and then the ult just kind of disappeared altogether. That was my first indication that I found out you can do that. When you're playing as Magneto, don't add any pressure when she casts her ult. Disengage, protect your allies, use your shield to block, you know, oncoming damage, and while you peel away from that fight. If you use your ultimate, I would suggest use your ultimate when you're trying to punish one of the enemy DPS hero's ultimate, and then if you really want to add insult to injury, aim that meteor at Invisible Woman to really cripple her, because there will be oftentimes that she might want to try to cast her ultimate at that time to try to heal her teammates that might get hit by the meteor. But if you aim at her directly, well, then you shut down that whole game plan altogether. And DPS hero who casted their ult and you absorbed that ult and you punished Invisible Woman for it, well, then that DPS hero who casted their ult, they'll be left with just basic abilities with one healer down, and that'll make it easier for you, for your teammates to punish them. Whereas if you're Cloak and Dagger and you're fighting against Invisible Woman, I would say focus on keeping your teammates alive, because even though you can duel against an Invisible Woman in a 1v1 situation, and it is possible, I wouldn't have that be your top priority in any type of fight. Trust your allies and trust your DPS heroes or your tanks to do that job for you, and then you just focus on keeping them alive, because Invisible Woman can put out some decent consistent damage, so then it'll be up to you to keep them alive during that duration. And if Invisible Woman casts her ult, and if you have your ultimate, then gauge when would be the best time to use your ultimate to keep your teammates alive if they can't get out of that bubble radius during the ult duration. So you can cast your ultimate and you can stack your dashes to keep your teammates alive, or you can wait until Invisible Woman's ult is about to disappear, then you can cast your ult around the enemy team. So then once the ult dissipates, then the dashes will be in effect, and then they'll take consistent damage, and which then gives you and your teammates an automatic area that you can re-engage the team fight and then punish them for it. So those would be my quick tips on how you could fight against Mr. Fantastic and Invisible Woman when you're playing as Magneto, Squirrel Girl, or Cloak and Dagger. Now, if we're going to talk about team synergies with these two characters, there is a lot of different team synergy opportunities if one of your teammates is Invisible Woman. I'll get to that later. However, there are still some synergies I can think of if one of your teammates is Mr. Fantastic, and I can quickly highlight that as well. But starting with Mr. Fantastic, one good team synergy I can really see is if you are playing as Cloak and Dagger or Squirrel Girl, Mr. Fantastic will act as the falsetto tank to protect you and Cloak and Dagger from oncoming divers, whether it be Venom, Hulk, Wolverine, etc. Especially in this season, the dive brawler meta is definitely present here. He can act as the falsetto tank. And then as Cloak and Dagger, you just focus on keeping Mr. Fantastic alive. If there are enemy heroes who has projectiles, who is trying to shoot at you or your teammates, Mr. Fantastic can easily pop that deflective ability and absorb a lot of that damage, and he can deflect it back at the enemy heroes. So then as Cloak and Dagger, you just try to keep him alive and basically use him as a meat shield. You know, stay behind him, because he'll take a lot of the damage for you, and he has ways to give himself over health, so you won't die as quickly compared to any other duelist hero. That's why I said he's literally a vanguard in a duelist body. Now as Squirrel Girl, Mr. Fantastic could be that amazing decoy to just wreak a lot of chaos in the front lines, and then you could just be that little scout, could be on the high ground and just pick off any enemies who are getting low on health by Mr. Fantastic, and you can CC lock any divers who might be getting too close to Mr. Fantastic if he's trying to retreat, or if he's busy in the front lines and you see that there's enemies trying to dive at your support characters, you can CC lock them as well, because she's a really good anti-dive hero, and I mentioned that in my advanced guide too. I can leave the link in the description below if you want more details on that. And during certain chokehold points between you and Mr. Fantastic, both of your ults would definitely be used with great value during certain chokehold points or even checkpoints on most of the maps. Now, if you're playing as Magneto, I don't see that much synergy with Magneto and Mr. Fantastic, other than the fact that he's just a falsetto vanguard, so you could treat him like any other vanguard. If he's up in the front lines, especially if he's deflecting shots, or if he goes into that giant elastic form mode, you can just cast your bubble on him, so he can absorb a lot of damage, but he won't get burst down as fast. And when Mr. Fantastic casts his ult, then you can easily assess any heroes who might be able to pick off Mr. Fantastic during his ult or CC lock him, so you can just be that bully like you're always trained to do, and just bully off those heroes who can stop Mr. Fantastic from his ultimate, and put pressure on them. So Mr. Fantastic could keep doing his bounces, cause damage, be the center of attention, and then you can just bubble him every now and then to keep him alive and up in the front lines longer. Because him being a duelist, there's a good chance he will output more damage than you, so just keep him alive as long as possible and he'll do the work for you. Now, if we're talking about Invisible Woman, out of the 3 characters, the best character that Invisible Woman pairs well with is Magneto. But hear me out. It's not because she can directly improve Magneto's gameplay, it's the fact that she can indirectly improve Magneto's gameplay by helping out Scarlet Witch. The reason why I'm saying this is because Invisible Woman's ultimate turns her allies invisible as long as they're within that radius. But her ultimate also slows down enemies who are also within that radius. See where I'm getting with this? Hear me out. You're going to be in the middle of a team fight, and let's say if one of the enemy team casts enough, doesn't matter, DPS, tank, or even support, right? And if you're seeing your teammates getting pressured and Invisible Woman casts her ultimate around the enemy team and somewhat around your team, then if you have a Scarlet Witch who has her ult ready, she can proc her ultimate and she cannot die as long as she's in that bubble. But more importantly, the enemy team cannot get out of that ult duration very well because they're all slowed by Invisible Woman's ult. So that's a double combo that Scarlet Witch and Invisible Woman could pair up together. And if there's anybody who's outside of that bubble radius, well, whether it be like a sniper like Hawkeye or Hela or even Iron Man, they can't see where Scarlet Witch is at. Therefore, they can't shoot at her to try to take her down because she's invisible. Therefore, that's almost a guaranteed wipe with any enemies within that bubble area. Why that pairs well with Magneto is because it'll actually give Scarlet Witch players a safety incentive to play as Scarlet Witch in ranked matches, maybe tournaments, or just any type of match without the fear of having their ult getting blasted all the time. They just need to coordinate their ultimate with Invisible Woman if your teammates have great communication. But if Scarlet Witch can feel comfortable being played more during this season, that would mean that you would have more opportunity to use your team up ability, which is the Chaotic Sword. And I mentioned that in my advanced guide with Magneto. That is his core ability to allow him to do a lot of damage, but also allows him to not focus on poking people mid-range. He can also poke people from afar because that's the only ability besides Mag Cannon where he can snipe somebody from afar. So the more matches you can get with that Chaotic Sword team up ability, the more opportunities you can actually be aggressive and be the bully that you know you can be as Magneto. But that's my biggest opinion and thought process of why Invisible Woman pairs so well with Magneto, because indirectly she pairs well with Scarlet Witch, which then gives you the team up ability more often. In terms of Squirrel Girl or Cloak and Dagger, simply put, they're just a really great duo of 2 support characters in this game so far, especially since Cloak and Dagger got a buff this season. Them 2 together could definitely keep your teammates alive, very much so. The only thing you 2 would be lacking is certain forms of CC, whether it be sleeping from Mantis or the freeze ability from Luna Snow. If you guys do a triple support comp, then that third person could be Luna Snow or Mantis, and you'll have that form of CC. But if it's just you and Invisible One, you just gotta pay attention of where you're at and how close you are to your teammates so you don't get dive a lot because you don't have that much of CC to deal with them. The closest thing of a CC that Invisible Woman have is her damaging orb ability that could slow enemy heroes who are at the center of the orb, but that's about it. Besides her psionic push or pull, that's like an instantaneous CC effect. It doesn't have an ongoing duration like the slow effect or the freeze or the sleep effect, and you can only use that so often. So as Cloak and Dagger, just stay close to your teammates, keep them alive, keep Invisible Woman alive so she doesn't have to keep using her double jump all the time to heal herself, and you 2 will be just fine in the battlefield. And as Squirrel Girl, just keep your healers alive, as I mentioned. If you notice that you're playing against a composition that has a lot of dive tank heroes, hang in the back line. CC lock anybody who's getting too close so that you and your support allies could burst them down and either make them regret it and kill them, or force them to retreat and think twice about engaging against you or your healers. And that's my thought process on the team synergies for Mr. Fantastic and Invisible Woman. Now that's the end of this video. Like I said, I just want to quickly get my thought process out there on certain tips and tricks on what you can do to duel against Invisible Woman and Mr. Fantastic in Season 1 of Marvel Rivals. I will do another video when Human Torch and the Thing comes out later on this season, which will probably be in about 5 to 6 weeks. And I'll give my thought process on how you can deal with those characters, when you're playing as Magneto, Squirrel Girl, or Cloak and Dagger. But if you like this type of video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and also leave a comment down below, because as I mentioned, I do take my time throughout my week to respond to your comments and any thoughts and opinions you might have on my videos. I do take them seriously, and also I do appreciate any of the feedback I get from you guys. So I do thank you for already doing that for me, and make sure you hit the notification bell so you can stay tuned for when I drop more videos on Marvel Rivals, when I talk about Magneto, Squirrel Girl, or even Cloak and Dagger throughout the seasons of Marvel Rivals. This is Mikerotastraphy, and I'll catch you guys later.